Happy 4th of July. You know, I'm definitely not an expert on American history. Know just enough to be dangerous, probably. But what I do know, I love. And I've been to many of the historical sites concerning the Revolutionary War and the events that led up to the war, and then things that happened after the war. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that. I don't know if Williamsburg is the place where it all started, but there was definitely a spirit there in Williamsburg. And if you've had a chance to go there, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I would, if you love American history, and I know there's a lot of people who watch this channel that aren't from the United States of America, and the 4th of July isn't all that important to them, but I'm not going to apologize for a second for not being proud in the righteous sense of pride. And incidentally, we're done with Beware of Pride Month. It was awesome. We thought about President Benson and his talk on Beware of Pride for the whole month. And now we move on. But I'm thrilled that the Lord put all these men and women together at the same time with this spirit of within them. So you have Williamsburg in Southern Virginia, which is really interesting because you have these Southern, what we would consider Southern folks in Virginia, and Washington, Jefferson, Thomas Paine is an interesting character. And I think it was Common Sense. I think that's what he wrote, where he, give me liberty or give me death. And he was a product of Williamsburg, born in England, so he had that background. Not all of the what we would call patriots were born in England, but Thomas Paine was, and just the oppression and but really the non-representation of those people that lived in the colonies. Let's say the colonies. The non-representation to the mother country was really the issue. At least that's what I see, and as that continued. So it was basically, we'll tax, the mother country will, England. Was it King George, I believe? I could be wrong on a lot of this, so you guys will help me. I haven't done any research currently, but anyway, so you have this fervor going on in Williamsburg, and they've recreated the town. And it's so cool. And the scene that they recreate when George Washington comes riding in on his white horse, it's pretty spectacular. And those true patriots. And when they signed the Declaration of Independence, basically saying, our lives, our possessions, our sacred honor, we're giving it, we're just saying that there's a bigger thing here that we are putting forth, and we're willing to sacrifice it all. Now, there's not too many people like that that live today, that are willing to go, you know what, I'm gonna just put it all my chips on this concept of having a republic that is for the people and by the people. Just an amazing thing. And we know through the Doctrine and Covenants that this was inspired by God 100%. And in my opinion, the main purpose of this country being created was so that the restoration could take place, the restoration of the Lord's church. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints through the prophet Joseph. This had to precede that. And it's amazing. And other than Benjamin Franklin, most of them were pretty young. And most revolutions, whether it's the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Restoration, these are young people, 20s. I submit that the apostles, the Christ followers, most of them, not all, but most were probably pretty young, including the apostles. We always see them, with the beards, and they're looking thoughtful, and they're old and wise. My guess is they were in their 20s and, kind of all over the place. Our missionary force, most, there's a few older people, but for the most part, we have 18 through, early 20s going out. So there's that fervor of youth, right? Well, then if you go up north, which is on the East Coast, particularly in the Boston, the Massachusetts area, and if you've ever been there, to me, it's just incredible. I just love Boston. You have the Freedom Trail, Fenwell Square, I think that's what it's called. You have the church, Paul Revere. Now, some will say, that it was that Longfellow that wrote the poem. It's so good. But so the church, and they had a system of warning where that if they saw, there would be one light if it was by land and two lights by sea. I could be wrong on that. In the church. And you can actually go to the church that's there, where then Paul Revere rode to, and I get the towns mixed because they were right close to each other. And we were actually there one year on the 4th of July, which wasn't the day of the first shot. The shots heard around the world of Lexington and Concord. But there's Samuel Adams Tavern or pub or whatever, where Paul Revere was going to ride to and warn these patriots that the British were coming. And there's a bridge, we walked across that bridge where these first shots were fired. So that's up north where the fervor on the activism was, I think, from my memory, was more activated in Southern Virginia. So, but then you have this situation in the north. And the northern people, colonists, had somewhat of a different mindset than the southern, but the thing they had in common was freedom, liberty, to say and do and choose, and to build, to have the ability that if I want to do something, I have the tools to do it. And nobody's going to stop me, kind of thing. So you had this really interesting thing. So Lexington and Concord, as my memory serves me, not that far out of the Boston area. And that is, to me, it's sacred ground. You also have Bunker Hill, a battle, just amazing, miracle after miracle after miracle. And I think I've mentioned this before, but Benedict Arnold, who later, it just came to my mind, he was a traitor, right? We look at him as a traitor. Well, if you go to St. John, New Brunswick, in the city, in the town square, there's a statue of Benedict Arnold, and there he's a hero. So it just depends on the perspective, right? In one case, he's the villain, the traitor, and we use his name, as, oh, well, that's a Benedict Arnold attitude kind of thing. Where in other circles, he defended the crown, and he was thought of as, in high regard. So that's kind of interesting. But in addition to these cool places right there in Boston, of course, you had the Boston Tea Party, which probably was the real kickoff. Throwing that tea so that it would not be taxed into the bay there, and to go and see the museum and all that kind of stuff. It just brings it to life. But so that's how Boston and the northern area, really got engaged in it. And then that's where the British troops came in to squelch, and you have the bit of the massacre there that's called a massacre. The Boston Massacre. And then you have the northern kind of leaders that come out of that. I think Adams Samuel Adams and John Quincy Adams, I believe, were brothers, maybe, I think. And I could be wrong on that. But so you had those, and then you had Washington and Jefferson from the South as leaders. So you're blending the coasts there with different dichotomies of farming and culture and all kinds of things. Ben Franklin, kind of a combo. He's a Philadelphian, which is where, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But in that same area of Boston, you have Lexington and Concord, where the Revolutionary War really, shots were fired, right? But in addition, you have Walden Pond that's close by. This is so cool. You have the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. It's just amazing, and it's all right there. Just such brilliant minds, all coming together. And I know some of those came later, but the influence and the culture of Boston and Massachusetts, you have all these higher higher education, higher learning institutions there. Of course, you have Harvard, and that's cool just to go there, right? I know I'm missing a lot of things, and I'm going by memory. But when you go to these places, you really can envision, and as you study them, you can see, what's happening or what happened, and the miracles that took place. This ragtag group under the leadership of Washington, taking on the greatest army in the world at the time and defeating them. And there were mercenaries from Germany. There were all kinds of things going on, and this ragtag group, freedom. And we can tie a lot of this into what we're studying in the Old Testament, with the ability to worship God, to worship the one and only true God. And in a sense, this was a religious war. This was a religious war. So you have that northern area. Philadelphia is incredible. Freedom Hall, the Liberty Bell, the actual Freedom Hall where they signed the Declaration of Independence, putting themselves out there, knowing that if they lose, they're going to get hung, and drawn and quartered probably for treason. But they saw a bigger cause. And we know of heavenly messengers that visited George Washington. We know of certain events that took place that were of a higher nature than just this earth and just a war over property or whatever. This was a big deal. This was a big deal. And this Constitution that was ratified by these colonies and the representative of these colonies, and there was always this battle of later states' rights over the federal government, and presidents had that same fight. Hamilton and Jefferson and these guys, they had their different opinions on it, and we can see that today on the Roe v. Wade thing. The issue at hand was decided here just a week or so ago by the Supreme Court, was really whether it's state rights or federal rights, and they determined it was the state right to determine the abortion legality of it, of abortion, of performing abortion. So it wasn't based on a moral issue. It was just based on a legal interpretation of state rights versus federal government overreach, I guess. And so there you have it. That existed right from the get-go. And these 13 original colonies and the representation, how they came together to declare their independence from England is truly amazing, because they had such differences, but they came together on the common thread of liberty that was in the fabric of their being, and it wasn't by mistake that they were all there together. Now, Benjamin Franklin is one of the most interesting characters, and he loved France, and they needed an alliance with France to have an ally, a European ally. And so nobody better than Benjamin Franklin. And then this ties in the whole Philadelphia thing. And you can go there and you can see the first post office. It's just, there's just so much. There's so much. And cemeteries where Mother Goose, the person that wrote all those Mother Goose rhymes and riddles and whatnot, buried there, as I recall. Churches and places of such significance, where amazing things took place. So we have Philadelphia, Freedom Hall. You have the Boston and Massachusetts area, where amazing things took place, and where the Revolutionary War really started. And then you have this place in Southern Virginia, Williamsburg, where there was just such a fervor of activism, I guess. I love to contemplate living at that time and wonder, would I take the easy road and go, I'll be British, I'll just be British and culture, and or would I be I'm gonna put all my chips there for freedom. I would hope I would have been one of those guys. Born at a later time. But you can see the restoration of the gospel followed right after that. Think about it. I mean, we have the Constitution, the Bill of Rights coming, in the 1780s, 87, something like that. So long after 1776. And so in the late 1700s, Joseph Smith was born in 1804. Good night. This was a young country. And then you have the Lewis and Clark expedition, funded or hired by Thomas Jefferson, Lewis and Clark, to explore the Louisiana Purchase and kind of figure all that out. And the things they saw, amazing. And what the report that they brought back, and the animals they saw, and all this stuff. The Westward movement began there with the Lewis and Clark expedition. And they didn't know where they were going or what they were doing. One of the interesting aspects of that was John Coulter. And we've talked a little bit about him. And Sue and I were just up at Coulter Bay last week or the week before, I can't remember now. And Coulter Bay, named after John Coulter, is just a fascinating man. He was hired by Lewis and Clark, and he kind of provided food and, hunted and whatnot for the group. And he made the journey all the way to Oregon, and on his way back, there was another group that were wanting to explore. And John Coulter said, I'm not really in the mood to go back to civilization. Yeah, I'll take you back there. And that's really when he found Yellowstone and came back with these tales that nobody believed of these geysers and hot pots and all this crazy stuff. He's really the one. And for a while, they called Yellowstone Coulter's Hell because it reminded them of the description of what hell would be like. Now we go, oh, it's paradise, it's so wonderful. But Coulter definitely had an influence on the Westward movement and exploring and all that kind of thing. So that's really a neat aspect for me, because you have Coulter Bay, you have the campground and all that area, all named after John Coulter. So and that was under Thomas Jefferson, and that the Lewis and Clark expedition, I think, started either the year before or the year of the birth of Joseph Smith. So you can see how all this was part of the plan. And for the Saints to end up in the Salt Lake Valley, where later you had the Henry Ashley expedition that came out. It was more of a fur trade, or the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. And that's where you have the likes of Jim Bridger, Thomas Fitzpatrick, Hugh Glass, and all these, Joe Meek, the Sublette brothers. You have all these mountain men that came out. And really, the Mormon pioneers gained a lot of information. Brigham Young gained a lot of information from these mountain men. And at Fort Bridger in Wyoming, he spoke face to face to Jim Bridger. And there's I don't think it's very substantiated, but it's said that something like you can't. Jim Bridger said to Brigham Young, you can't settle the Salt Lake Valley. It's not fertile enough. And I'll give you $1,000 if you can get a bushel of corn from there. Now, I don't believe that story. Jim Bridger was one of the first to go all the way around the Great Salt Lake to see if it was part of the ocean or not, canoed around it. He knew the valley, and he knew the grass was very tall in the valley. And the other way they would tell is by sagebrush. If the sagebrush was tall, they knew the dirt was, the soil, I should say, was fertile. And so I think it was probably just the opposite. I think it was, that it was just to kind of make Brigham Young look a little bit better. Like, hey, we settled in the most desolate place that we possibly could. But the Salt Lake Valley, actually, with the streams running, you had City Creek, you had Mill Creek, you had Big Cottonwood Creek and Little Cottonwood Creek, all running down through the valley, and then into the Jordan River, and then you had Utah Lake to the south, and it was quite a protected and quite a fertile valley for what we would think of in the desert or in the West. So all this was part of the restoration. It was all part of the plan. But to think about those shots in Lexington and Concord, and to think about the brave men and women who put it all on the table, that's what I think of when I think of the 4th of July. It's all of that. It's all of that. And the midnight ride of Paul Revere. Some historians will say, well, that's not actually true and all that. Well, how do they know? I think I said it was Longfellow that wrote the poem. Maybe he knew more than they know. I know Paul Revere's family they were silversmiths, I believe, and he was a patriot, and he made that ride to Lexington and Concord to warn them that the British were coming. Why do we try to remake everything to make it, And then the other thing that really drives me nuts is this idea that these early patriots, particularly Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, because they had, tobacco was their main crop. They had others, but their farms, their ranches, that if you ever get a chance to see, it's just spectacular. It's also interesting to see what's run by the federal government, these parks and places of interest versus privately held places where the family or a group of concerned citizens, they run it and own it. There's such a difference. The privately held places of historic significance are really way better than those by the federal government, like the Arlington, not just the cemetery, but the farm it was basically taken. But anyway, run down, and the federal government owns it, and they're asking for contributions when you go there, to help restore things and stuff. I'm like, hey, I pay taxes, instead of maybe shipping all of our money overseas, why don't we fix up what we have here, kind of thing. But Monticello, sorry, I think it is that Jefferson's? Again, kind of going by memory here, just beautiful, and the history. But obviously Washington and Jefferson had slaves. It was just the way it was. And they knew that there would be a time, both of them, that would be done away with. And they were setting the groundwork. And so you can't just stop everything all at once. Either side would not survive. This had to be a gradual awakening. But the very Constitution and the Bill of Rights, to me is, and then the First and Second Amendment and the other amendments are amazing. But the Bill of Rights is really so key. And it wasn't an afterthought, but you can tell the Lord was like, hey, we're not done here. You gotta have the Bill of Rights. But all men are created equal. All men. And of course, let's say mankind, so womankind, men and women created equal with the same opportunities. That's the goal. Now, you can't just change everything, because it would have immediately wiped out whole economies where everyone would have been basically, if not destroyed, would have been hurt so significantly it would have taken much longer to recover. So the gradual way of making, till we get to the Emancipation Proclamation with the Civil War, which is a whole nother cool story. And if you've never been to Gettysburg, gotta be on the list, man. That is sacred ground. I'll tell you, when we went to Gettysburg in the summer, it was hot. There would be this kind of mist in the morning, you know, steam almost like, right? And but you get to Gettysburg and the different battlefields and the different layout, and we had these, we were listening to a CD set that I had bought. This was a few years ago, but we'd listen so we could visualize, you know, the battles and everything that took place at where we were right at that time. And the interesting thing with Gettysburg, and you can tell that it's sacred because even young children whisper. You know, we were just like, wow, it was so noticeable how reverent everyone was. And the events of the Civil War well, there were many battles, right? But that one at Gettysburg in Western Pennsylvania, or I guess maybe Central, I can't remember. Not Philadelphia side, but but you know, further west in western part of Pennsylvania. Another very significant. And that's really where what Washington and Jefferson, Adams, what those men and women did at the beginning were more realized at the Civil War. And so there you have it. A lot of it's my opinion, but, you know, and I'm going by memory on things here. But it's hard to not think of the Civil War. It's hard to, when you think of July 4th, it's hard not to think of both the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and all the events in between. So I love this country. I love the men and women that answered the call. Valley Forge, holy smokes, and King of Prussia, the town in Pennsylvania, King of Prussia. I don't know. I got lost there so many times I couldn't figure out where I was, but Valley Forge is so significant. What happened there, and to me, Valley Forge reminds me a lot of Joseph Smith in Liberty Jail. It's like the light bulb went on. And it's like Joseph Smith from that point on was like, bring it on. Whatever happens, happens. I know why I'm here. I know my purpose. And I know there's going to be a lot of tough and bad things happen, but I get that there's a bigger picture. And to me, that's what happened to George Washington was Valley Forge. He came out of that like, hey, this is bad, but you know what? It's going to turn out pretty good. And from that point on, he just, you know, like, yeah, we're going to have some tough battles. We're going to have some interesting things, but I kind of know the outcome here. That's what it seems like to me. Anyway, happy 4th. And for those of you that aren't living or citizens of this country, the United States of America, I hope you know that the founding of this nation was a blessing to all nations, because this is where the restoration took place. And this is where the Constitution was divinely inspired, that now influences most all the countries in the world. Now, there's going to be another liberty, and it's already happened, and that's in Israel. And we're going to see similar things. And there's going to be a leader that emerges in Israel. And that's going to be Jesus Christ. And that day, I'm really looking forward to. So God bless. Happy 4th. We'll talk to you soon.